Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before I do some introductions, I want to welcome everybody on behalf of the Southwest Ontario branch of the CSCM, affectionately known as the SOBs. So, and definitely on behalf of our president, Joanne Hosak, who is also on the call today. So thank you for attending. Definitely very excited about this session. Just a couple of housekeeping items before I pass the floor over. Please keep an eye on your mute. We all know that please keep yourself muted at all times if possible. Please put your full name in your box so that we know we can give you some education credits. First names are not helpful for education credits. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the session today. But please feel free to use the chat because it's a great way to be interactive. And if you don't know Mark, and if you haven't been involved with Mark before, this will be a highly interactive session. So I definitely encourage you to turn your cameras on. I encourage you to listen intently because even if you don't put your hand up, there's liable to be a question asked of you. So this is going to be an exciting, engaging session. So first and foremost, I want to introduce our speaker today. If you haven't had the privilege of meeting Mark, Mark Thompson is the president and chief engagement officer of McKinley Solutions Exchange, based in Toronto. Mark is a nationally recognized speaker in leadership, team building, human capital, and Mark is also a sought-after lead trainer for groups of all sizes. He's been actively involved with the PGA, the NGCOA, and also the PGA. So Mark is definitely a recognized speaker, and he holds a business degree in specialization in human resources and management from Bishop's University. What a great school. We'll talk about that further. And he's a successful Ironman triathlete, youth mental health advocate, cancer fundraiser, road cyclist, foodie, international mountaineer, and most importantly, a proud husband and father of 2 active boys. So I've had the privilege personally of knowing Mark for 15 years. I've had him involved in multiple clubs. I've had him engaged with our ownership group and also with another industry board. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor over to Mark Thompson in regards to managing ownership and accountability, living above the line. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Simon. Just to confirm, everybody can see me plus the PowerPoint? Good. So we will be interactive. You will be using the chat function primarily as the way in which we go through this. If you have questions, I commit to, we only have about 45, 50 minutes of sort of live delivery. I will be getting you to answer some questions in the chat and try and make it as interactive as possible. For those that know me, if there's a follow, you know that if you reach out afterwards, if you've got a question that's not answered, I'll be happy to make sure that we get it done. Session is being recorded, so I'm going to encourage you to use that afterwards. Go back to it. I've made a commitment to Simon to follow up with all of the participants, so we'll be getting a list, and we run a program with all of our deliveries. Used to do them live. Now we do it virtual. The commitment remains the same. You'll get learning loops that'll follow up afterwards. So you'll get a learning loop that you'll practice as an individual. You'll get a learning loop that practices as a team, and then give you a learning loop that practice as an organization. So you should be looking at 3 follow-ups after the session. If you have questions, jump in. We do have some slides to go through, so we'll jump in there right away. As I said, thank you. Simon and I have worked together for on and off in a variety of different locations in industry and associations over 15 years. I've had the privilege of knowing many of you on the screen, so it's nice to see some faces. I know some of you are waiting for some overdue haircuts, depending on what zone you're in, but it is a pleasure to see you. And I was looking up, actually, when the first time I got engaged with CSCM was the Winnipeg conference in the fall of 2006. So I've been around. The one thing I do remember of that trip, I didn't bring enough clothes for Winnipeg in the fall. I don't think you bring enough clothes for Winnipeg anytime 10 months out of the year. Probably I could get it right 2 months of the year. So it is a pleasure to be involved and share some ideas. So what we're going to do now, we're going to get your fingers on the keyboard. We're going to do a bit of a silent sharing here. I'm going to make sure that the chat is available afterwards as well. Let's start with the first question. How would you define responsible? Don't worry about spelling. For those that know me well, I'm dyslexic. I won't see it anyway. How would you define responsible? Doing the right thing. Thank you, Tal. Asking ownership, okay? Or taking ownership, sorry. Feel free to add maturity, okay? Thank you, Lisa. Taking ownership. Doing what we think is right, great. Thinking actions, yeah. Thank you, Josh. Okay, let's go on to the next question. How would you define accountability? Please type it in the chat function. Taking ownership, Dan. Thank you. The buck stopped with you. I like that, John. Good one. Feel free to keep adding. Taking ownership, yeah. Owning your mistakes and your accomplishment. Good one, Brad. Holding promises and holding to promises, commitments. Yes. Thanks, Paul. Okay, and you can feel free to keep adding, but the last one, how would you define an accountable culture from an organization side of things? An accountable culture. Honesty. Thanks, Ryan. Do what you say you're going to do. One supports each other in achieving their collective goals. Great. That's a good one, John. That's going to come up shortly. Clarity, honesty, and follow-up. Yeah, that's good, Tal. Honesty. Thank you, Martin. Lead by example and following up. Absolutely. Follow up, follow through. Or is that your golf swing? Okay. Psychological safety, Ryan. Yes. Were you on my LinkedIn earlier today? If anybody's interested, I posted a really good article on psychological safety within organizations on LinkedIn. Highly, highly recommend you take a look at it. Okay, so let me roll here on some definitions. I want you to be thinking about a couple of things. One, if you're taking notes, use a pen and a paper. The ability to retain it is that much stronger, okay? Typing notes is not as strong from a memory retention and an adult learning side of things. So do write notes as you go through. Defining accountability. We use this definition of accountability for many years. And as further research came out and as we started to dig in this a little bit deeper, when you think about accountability, it's responsibility, answerability, blameworthiness, liability, the state of being answerable. But what got interesting over the years, we saw this definition where responsible and accountable were interchangeable. And the reality is they're not, they're very different. And when you look at your training, I want you to reflect on the messages you give your staff, the pre-shifts that you're doing. You know, we're all responsible for this. Are you accountable for that? What language are you using? But when you get into the definitions here, responsible, okay? Responsible, answerable, accountable for something. It can be bestowed on somebody. I can make you responsible for something, okay? The challenge here is when you start to look at the old definition of accountability, the lines get very blurred. Subject to obligation, explain or justify, it occurs after the fact. We want you shifting to this style of definition, making a personal choice, demonstrate the ownership necessary to achieving desired results. We're going to get deeper into this here in a moment. See it, own it, solve it, do it. So we've used this mantra. It's based out of a book called Fix It. I will make sure everybody gets a copy. Where's my camera here? Everybody gets a copy of the book summary. Highly recommend the read. It's a continuation for those that have done training with me before. It's the same authors as Challenging Crucial Conversations and Crucial Confrontations. So it's their evolution around crucial accountability. Highly, highly recommend the read. This here, the main difference between the old and new definition is old is after the fact and consequential in nature. When you look at this from a new, it happens proactively ahead of the time, personally acquired and applied. It's an active choice. Our job as leaders is to create an environment under which people want to do this. And what we want to be very careful about here is when you take this information and disseminate it back to your teams, we want to be mindful of, are we back in the old definition of after the fact, negative in nature, or are we driving it forward where we're creating an environment under which people want to make a personal choice? That's a big difference. And a lot of it comes down to language. So we're going to break this down a little bit more here. Feel free to jump in with questions or comments, or hey, Mark, I like that slide, you know, slide with accountability. Happy to make sure that you get copies of them. Big difference here is responsible versus accountable. Accountable as at a broader concept. You might have department heads that are accountable for their budgets, and their teams are responsible for execution. But at the end of the day, their overall accountability is a much bigger picture. So I want you thinking about where the accountability lies with each of the actions you're asking individuals to do. And I want you to start to think about, when am I using accountable and responsible interchangeably, and how can I make that distinction moving forward to make the lines a lot clearer? Some of you might have seen this slide. I actually have brought it into a number of organizations. We have a number of clients that have actually captured this slide. I can send it to you, but it's readily available online. What gets interesting here is clients have actually turned this into reminders, old school employee boards on where is your mindset today? What's the active choice you're making? Are you living above the line, or are you living below the line? So you see possibilities, you make choices, you take responsibilities, solve, own it, see it, seek solutions, take action. I've had comments from me I've had comments when I've shared this in the hospitality industry and in the seasonal hospitality industry in particular, where people say, Mark, I don't have time to fix the bottom. They're only my employees 4 months of the year. For those that know me, I've said this many times. Your employees are your employees 12 months a year. They might happen to be on payroll 4 months a year, but you treat and respect them like your employees 12 months a year. I remember having a conversation with a leadership team, big club in the GTA going through renovation. Lots of great information was being shared with the membership. And I made a passing comment to the president at the time. And I said, have you shared that information with the staff? And his comment back to me was, well, why would I do that? You know, and I was sort of, I mean, he was big hulking presence of a guy. So I was very professional. And I said, because I think they'd want to know. They've been here for a while. Like, this is cool. This is exciting. But he had the mindset that, you know, really they're not involved in this. He wasn't in relation to the staff, seeing what the possibilities of sharing that with them. So I highly encourage you to think about where your staff are sitting. Quick jump in the chat here. How many of you have, over the course of the last 12, you know, we can now say over the last year because we've passed the 1 year mark of the pandemic, how many of you, just a yes or a no, and if you don't want to add into the chat, that's fine. How many of you have found yourself, for the stress of the last year, living below the line on certain scenarios? Just a Y or an N in the chat function. I'll add two. Oh, hey, Daniel. Didn't
How are
see
you?
there. Good, you?
Not too bad. Sorry, membership sales sometimes comes first.
Hey, no, that's good. So what I want you thinking about here is, as you're onboarding your staff, I want you to remember that they've gone through. Thank you for the honesty. I mean, some of you are saying no, some of you are saying yes. I'll be very transparent, saying yes. There's times where my brain has gone to live below the line, and it's the energy drain that's there takes that much more juice to get back. So I want
No,
you
I was
thinking.
looking for. I thought you.
Daniel, can you mute yourself for us? Thank you. What I want you thinking about is the honest truth that sometimes you're going to have good employees, in fact, great employees, show up with the mindset of living below the line. It can be a blip in the radar. Be mindful that we don't judge a blip in the radar. Once it becomes spread out over time, then you've got a problem. But be mindful that little blip in the radar is, it's your job as leaders to help them get back above the line because you know they live there normally. So just be mindful of where they're coming from. Daniel Goldsmith, Marshall Goldsmith, one of the top coaches in the world, wrote an article that I'm happy to share with anybody. And he said, the best advice I can give leaders today is to be human. And he listed all kinds of other skills that are required to lead in today's space. But you got the top coach in the world leading the top or coaching the top Fortune 500 CEOs. And he put it as simply as, in today's time, 2020, 2021, he's repeated it several times. The best advice he can give leaders is to be human. Great article, great summary, but let's remind ourselves when we get stressed. The golf industry, from a playing side of things, had a lot of pressure under last year. We will fall below the line sometimes. Our staff will fall below the line. Be mindful. Now, here is the key piece as we get into this, is some of the language. So I can see some of you taking pictures. Feel free to do so. I'm going to make the PowerPoint available as well, and Simon can post that. When we have above the line thinking, we think about, what are my responsibilities? How can I take ownership? How can I contribute? What could I be doing differently? What is my role? What difference can I make? How can I make a difference? How can I be helpful? How can I cooperate? How can I support, add value, be of service, involve the right people? When you look at this list, when you start to think, okay, what's one piece that I'm going to grab onto this year with my senior leadership team? And that's the one. We're going to have the mindset, the thinking of, what can we do different, or clarify roles and expectations. One of the biggest opportunities that we find, feel free to jump in the chat as I'm going here. Which one do you think is going to be your senior leadership's team rally cry around thinking above the line? One that I can tell you that we're spending a lot of time with in multitude of different organizations and different industries is focusing in on clarifying what everybody's role is and how it syncs with the overall success of the organization. So number 1 and number 5 are very high on people's list that we're working with currently, because they've not taken the time. There's been a lot of assumptions, and good people doing good things for the right reasons is not a strategic plan. So I want you thinking about, what are your roles and expectations, making sure they are shared and understood with everybody. Okay, so guys, think about your language here. Think about which one you're going to own. Feel free to write it down. You can jump in the chat and share. Below the line thinking is justifications, excuses. They're wrong. It's not my fault. Okay. It's got to be my way, or my biggest pet peeve. We've always done it that way. And I mean, to me, the hair on the back of my neck just goes, are you freaking kidding me? Like, nobody's done what we did in the last 12 months, let alone what you're going to go into in this season. And someone says, we've always done it this way. I just, like, I can't go any more white, as most of you can see on the screen. So it's the hair on the back of my neck that stands up, goes, guys, you cannot be in this space. Sure, you're going to fall sometimes. It's your job as leaders to make sure people come up. The other one that you'll see pop up here is finger pointing. It's, we had a rough tournament, so it's the ground's fault. No, it's the food and beverages fault. No, it's golf operations. Well, it's the administration. So you're running basically 5, 6 entities within one organization. This below the line thinking can eat you alive from the inside out. Feelings. Okay, so now we're talking about what's that palpable feeling when you start talking about living in, above and below the line. Frustration below the line, impatient, urgent, suspicious, resentment, overwhelmed, fear, tension. How many of you have been overwhelmed in the high season of late July, early August? We've all felt it. So how do we make sure that we know these feelings are going to bubble up sometimes, but how do we make sure that we're managing this concept of how to make sure these are real, we acknowledge them, but we don't let us suck us below the line. Above the line is curious, compassion, empowered, enthusiastic. Here's my challenge to you from a feeling side of things, is, do your department heads know what they are empowered to do? Do you enthusiastically encourage them to think different, do different, engage in a different way, and be able to deliver that service at a level that is expected? So again, now we're starting talking thinking. Now we're started talking feeling inside. Okay. Now we start body language. I'm coaching an owner right now of an auto dealership group. They've got 3 auto dealerships. They got about 140 staff, and he's a smart individual. He's a successful individual. He's been doing. He's born into the industry. His dad's one of the dealer principals, and what we gets interesting is he knows everything on these first ones. What he should be thinking, what his staff should be thinking, where he should be above and below the line, and then he falls completely on his face when it comes to the actual body language, because he's saying all the right things and then the body language is negating all of it. So in theory, I want you to be thinking about this aspect of what is the body language when you're interacting and trying to live above the line. That is an important differentiator when you start to look at uh, saying all the right words, having all the right words, but then go and then completely ruin it via body language. So this element of, our shoulders are tight, tense, pressure, butterflies, we've got to get something done. Like this pressure can mount, but when you start to think about what is in your control, how do you manage this when the times are tough? I want you to be thinking about it. I mean, as I said, we've shared, I know a lot of you here, but what are you doing to encourage this in the behavior of the staff that report to you? Some of you know this and do this. I know because I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to work with you. But what are you doing to encourage the body language of your staff in that living above the line? We can talk about it in theory, but what are we doing to really encourage how they're showing up, how they're interacting? I remember one of my mentors in the industry when I was a student. I was working at a private club in Montreal. I remember going for a walk, and I was managing the pool facility on the golf course at the time. And we were walking from a clubhouse out to the pool, and every action, every behavior, every body language was living above the line, to the point of stopping to pick up that piece of garbage that wasn't his job, to helping somebody get the golf clubs out of the golf cart, out of the trunk of their car, because they weren't struggling, just it was the right thing to do. What are the body language behaviors that you're encouraging? We have a tendency in a pre-shift, in an orientation, to be focused on the technical aspect of it. We forget that these are actually more important to the overall delivery of your service. So if I were to ask you, I'm not going to call each of you out, but well, why not? Stephen, when you, Mr. Grass, when I saw you've got a target date for opening, and when you're thinking about your orientation, if memory serves, from a Friday Harbor side of things across the board, you onboard people over a period of time. So you bring in as you grow and as the season gets busier and busier and busier. Is the orientation, do you get to this level of body language and thinking and feeling and communication style, or are we more focused on the technical aspect, just looking for a balance?
We would certainly, we have an orientation that's kind of resort based. So we talk about standards, and so communication style and body language would be a part of it, but I don't necessarily know it would be as in depth as this. From a technical standpoint, we would then, we bring people on, and then, we'll train them over the course of a week, but absolutely would not go over body language, I wouldn't think.
No, and the reason that I asked that, because I know many of the clubs that you guys are coming, that you're from, Stephen has the benefit of an HR team behind him, and and I've gotten to know them off and on over the last couple of years. The benefit of, that we're not even addressing this detail when we've got HR practitioners that are involved in our organization. No fault, and I'm not blaming. I just wanted to highlight that even at a club that has that level of resource, we're still forgetting. Orientation is not compliance-based training, and we've treated it like that for so long. I remember sitting working on an orientation with a club about probably 5 or 6 years ago, and the general manager of the club gets up and says, well, and they were practicing their opening speeches, and we were filming, giving feedback and stuff, and they said, well, welcome to a club that's, over 100 years old. And I'm sitting in the back of the room trying to think like a 19-year-old that they've just hired, going, oh my God, I just joined something that's over 100 years old. Where's the fire escape type of scenario? You're trying to indoctrinate these people into the culture of the organization. Really look at what you want them to do. They'll get the technical. Stars hang out with stars, passengers hang out with passengers. Make sure you talk to your stars and you get your stars to get everybody else along on the technical. Focus on the energy that you're trying to actually drive, and don't kill it with body language. Fair enough? Okay. Here's one that I like when you really get into the language. How many of us have caught ourselves? You can even do this with your kids. No, but you should have done it this way. You must do it that way. We've always done it that way. My biggest pet peeve, okay? Never do it that way. We do it this way. So that's below the line language. This above the line language is these I statements. You replace, this is the no but zone, okay? For those of you that have significant others, how many of you have been asked, how does this look on me? And you go, yes, but. I mean, you're dead in the water with that statement. I've been 20 plus years married, and I still make that mistake. But we do it with staff as well. Somebody will come to you with a concept and they'll go, here's what I'm thinking, or here's what we've just done. And then you go, yeah, but. Does anybody know what that does to the motivation of that individual? Crushes it like a bug, okay? And if you do that time over time, they've done longitudinal studies that says the more but you use in your language, the less innovation comes out of your staff, the less collaboration, the less overall engagement your staff will be. So I want you thinking this, move from a but to an and mentality. It is about us. It is about we. It is about ours. What would it look like if we did this? I remember working with a club in Montreal, another club in Montreal, and big facility. So the onboarding of the staff, we were doing simultaneous French and English delivery with over 200 staff. And the piece here that was fascinating to me was you have a long-standing general manager, grew up on the property. He's now since retired, and he said, I asked him to close, and he said, I asked him to close and say, what was the thing you learned the most today? And he said, I'd like to thank so-and-so. And it was one of the youngest individuals. It was her first job outside of working at Tim Hortons. Pardon me. And she had a really cool idea that had nothing to do with where she was coming from. But you have one of the longest standing employees in the club, the leader of the operational success of the organization, listening to a 16-year-old. So to me, that was a fascinating, like, what could it look like if? Okay. So I want you thinking along those lines from a language side of things. I also want you thinking about, where does this sit with your staff? When you're sitting in on a staff meeting, what are your staff saying? Are they using the below the line language? Okay. And when you start to hear that, it's an opportunity to improve your overall dialogue. Are we good so far? Any questions? Okay, and it turns out that story of one of my mentors is, I've just been told, is on the call. So thank you. We'll get to that in the Q&A afterwards. So when you think about this above the line, this ownership, accountability, and responsibility, it's, where's your oar in the water? Or is your team going to bed? Blame, excuses, and denial. Where are they sitting? Okay. Feel free. We're going to be jumping into a bit of a different model on how we actually work our way out of this. But feel free to be adding questions as they come up. Could be me, but I forget unless I ask. I start jumping them in the chat. So the See It, Own It, Solve It, Do It. As I said, I'll make sure that this is available to you. Fix It is the book that this is based on. These are 16 accountability traits that we would highly recommend that you look at. So when you're trying to solve, to increase overall accountability within the organization, seeking others' perspectives. I remember one property we worked with, the superintendent stood up and said, if anybody wants to come and learn about the operations and from the superintendent side of things, I'm buying you lunch. And they were at different entrance to the property, so it took somebody that was curious to get involved. Over the course, he said that statement over the 3 years we worked with that club, and 3 people showed up. So this element of getting other people's perspectives. We worked with a chef at a hotel that always started at the beginning of the season by working on the dish line to see the kitchen from a different lens, to really see what was going on. How many of you are looking from an accountability side of looking at it from other people's perspectives? Where is your communication? Is it open and candid? Do you have a culture of feedback? Okay. We do a lot of work around feedback. That's the ability to give and receive feedback. We're going to talk about it from a supportive feedback side of things. Deal with the hard things, see the realities. It's nice to go, let's deal with this shiny object over here, but let's make sure we're dealing with the hard stuff. Be personally invested. I know some of you well enough to know that it's important that you know everybody's name that you can, and then you have that personal connection with them. You know, when we start talking about roles, senior leaders within organizations, part of your role is to be that connector. Did you know so-and-so lives by you and you've got this connection between you? Or did you know that the two of you went to the same school? As some of you on this call did. You did go to the country club that I had the pleasure of being at for a few years, a little bit longer than they asked me to be, but that's because of my academic prowess. How many of us are talking about the successes and failures? From an academic side, we've been trained to only talk about learning from our failures. When we start talking about your successes and failures, are you debriefing what they were both times? We tend to go, well, that didn't go like we planned. And then we do a deep dive and an analysis on it. When it's a success, we go, whew, on to the next thing, especially in the middle of the season. So you want to be careful about this aspect of being mindful of learning from both sides of things. Some of you have heard me say this statement before. You might have function sheets in the clubhouse for certain events that are going on. How many of those function sheets define what success is before you start? So the mindset of, if you know what success is from an accountability side, then you can actually shoot at something. Sorry, I've been talking all day. How many of you share your key results? What is your team driving at? Do they know, do the frontline servers know what is expected of them? What is the targets? What does success look like? I want you to be thinking about this. Acting on feedback, number 8. Someone might give you feedback, but you don't do anything with it. What does that say to the value of that person that put themselves out there? We need to be able to act on feedback where appropriately. Pardon me, where appropriately. But if you are going back here to this asking and for and offering feedback and creating a culture of feedback, you need to show that you're acting upon it. It's for those that do, for an example, do an employee engagement survey and then don't share any of the results. You don't have to share all the results. We focus on key messages, no more than 6 messages, 3 themes in each, 1 page. So, but you've done something with that information. Constantly asking what else I can do. Do we have a mindset amongst your front food and beverage or your golf services operations people? The one that my pet peeve, we've done a lot of work in the restaurant space, you know, in Toronto when restaurants were open.
Cool.
Oh, who's on here? That sounds like Tal. Oh, he's off again. So what else can I constantly do? A pet peeve in the restaurant, as for those that have come up within the food and beverage ranks, is when you see somebody at a side station going, my section's good, like they're good, they've got their dinner, they've got their menu, like we're good, the tables are clear, and then you look one section over and the person is completely slammed, not being able to keep up. So do we have the mentality and mindset of living above the line, asking what else can I do? Collaborate across functional boundaries, get exposed to as many elements of the business as possible will increase overall accountability. Creatively dealing with obstacles. I want you giving your teams permission to look and do different. Take the necessary risks. Some of you have teams that are willing to put themselves out there, but we need to be encouraging them to do so. Keeping your word. Paul, Mr. Morrell, you said that earlier when we talked about the definition of accountability. Giving your word and following through, following up on it, okay? Number 14 is one of the most popular ones when we introduce this model of living above and below the line. It's no finger pointing. There's no value in doing this, okay? But we do it via body language, we do it directly, we do it overtly sometimes, but what I want you thinking about is when we truly own that accountability, we see it, own it, solve it, do it, okay? I want you thinking about that means no finger pointing. If something went wrong, we all own it. And that mindset is a very different mindset than we're good in our department, okay? Many of you could break the organization down into 4 or 5, sometimes 6 very distinct departments that could act as businesses themselves. But the reality is you're all serving the same members and guests. And what are you doing to act and think collaboratively across that? Tracking your progress. If we don't know, we come back here, what the key results are, how do we know we're getting successful? Typically that means, I'm trying to pick somebody here. Oh, that'll be in someone like, Lisa, when she was allowed to do weddings. She, at the end of the event, will go around and say, great job, great job, great job. But if they actually know what their targets are, they get to this part, they get to this part and they know internally that they've hit their targets. Okay, that's great service there, Tal. Okay, building an environment of trust. This takes time, okay? If you are looking
Mark,
at
just because your wife doesn't bring you espresso during your afternoon discussion, don't be hacking on me. Think above the line.
I was
Don't think
impressed.
below the line. Come on.
I was impressed. Building an environment of trust. What are we doing to actively build an environment of trust? Again, the pressure is on the mindset of we do 12 months of work within that golf season. For those who are at golf facilities, what we tend to forget that we go all operational right away. For those that are in 12-month facilities like Mr. Morel, when he's open, it's pressure all the time. Okay. So there's pressure now too, but that's a different reason. So again, I want you clarifying what the key metrics are. Do not keep, information is not power anymore, folks. We used to keep all of this information really close to our vest at the senior side of things. Why are we not sharing that information with our frontline staff so they can be successful? They know what's going on. When you have metrics and you have targets, make sure that they're shared with as many people as possible. Personal responsibility. I like this code. I won't wait. It's up to me. Who and when, take the shot, not pass the buck. You can count on me. It is my job. Just do it, and I will, and me. So again, this mantra, this mindset, this focus is critical to living above that line. I'm going to go through one more model with you. And again, feel free to be jumping in with questions. I'm going to share a model that is moving individuals from motivated to engaged. So we started talking about living above and below the line. At the end of the day, we can have a motivated individual that lives below the line. So think about that. You've got a motivated individual living below the line. Are they thinking about the overall success of the organization? Are they thinking about the overall collaboration of the business and cross-functionally? No, a motivated individual is internally focused. An engaged individual connects with the larger organization, connects with the bigger picture. But what we've forgotten to do in the industry for the large part is we make assumptions that actually happened. I want you building those bridges. I want you making those connections. I want you really sharing where we're moving from an engaged to a motivated employee. Fair enough? So I just shared a few. This aspect of internal, externally focused, opportunistic, committed, short-term, long-term, narrow focus versus big picture, unstable and stable. Now we're going to get into where this really lies. Some of you have heard me say this before. The biggest reason people leave or stay with an organization is what? Anybody remember? And jump in the chat. There's one single biggest reason why people leave or stay with an organization. Good listening, Lisa, and it's also right on the screen. It is the relationship with their supervisor, okay? It's a direct relationship with their direct supervisor, not a couple levels up. I have a client right now where top 2 are fine. We've got a challenge at the middle operational level, and we've got a high turnover rate we're trying to solve. So they're giving the best attempt to invest in these individuals, but at the end of the day, they know where the pinpoint is, okay? Up to 70% of people will leave or stay with an organization because of their relationship with their direct boss. The next one that comes into play is their aspect with the team members. How are they connecting? We talked about being the chief connecting officer. making sure your teams know each other and they trust each other. People have a higher degree of engagement when they actually know the individual at a personal level. Be personally invested came in one of the aspects of increasing overall accountability. Then we start talking about connections to the organization, respecting the organization, being a brand ambassador of the organization. And then our fourth one from an overall engagement side of thing is actually the connection to the work. Some people have a tendency to start with my connection to the work, but it's all the first three steps are all primarily the first two are relationship based. But what do we do during orientation? What do we do during a pre-shift? What do we do when somebody sort of veers this way, when you want them to veer this way? We focus on the work and we forget that we got to make sure those relationships are established and connected. So keep that in mind as you're ramping up for those that are not 12 months a year, when you're ramping up on a seasonal level. Oh, sorry. So this is a bit of a meter that really highlights a couple of key things. When you look at the actively disengaged to the actively engaged, which numbers do you feel the bulk of the population sit in North America? Just type them into the chat. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And for those not paying attention, feel to throw in a 6 or a 7 too. That's up to you. Bulk of the population sits between 1 and 2. Okay. And the reason, like I mean, Tal, I loved your facial reaction there, your body language reaction. Most people that are on calls like this are sitting at a 4 or 5, so they can't believe somebody's sitting way over there at a 1 to a 2.5. So it's that shift of, but here's the catch, folks. Where do you spend most of the time? Where is most of your energy being driven? Most of your energy is driven in individuals that fall in 1, 2 to the top of 3. Research will actually support that 75% of your HR dedicated time as a manager, you sit in 1 and 2 and part of 3. And we kind of go, oh, people over in the 4 or 5, they're okay. But we forget that they're sitting there going, hey, we're holding up the ship here, and you haven't talked to us in a while because that squeaky problem over there hasn't gone away. So I want you thinking about this. And again, moving people above and below the line, moving them from motivated to engaged. Where is your energy spent? Think about the exponential energy to move somebody from a 1 to the 2, and you go, yes, they're actively not engaged anymore. They're just disengaged. As opposed to taking somebody from a engaged to a really actively engaged, committed individual. This we leave to chance too often. Okay, I like this from a different way to highlight it. And again, happy to send this on to you. This is based on a book, Carrots and Sticks. Number 1, they create the mess, walks past the mess without a thought, hopes not to see the mess, will clean it up if personal benefit, cleans up the mess he or she sees, helps clean it up and fixes and prevents it from the future. To me, that is a real big representation of what your staff sits, where your staff sits. And you can sit there honestly and go, I wouldn't write it down if you're on site. If you're at home, that's different. But I would, when you sit there and go, just put lines and go, how many people are sitting in the 2? How many people are sitting in the 3? And then go, well, where as a senior leadership team is the energy that we're going to focus on? We made an active decision with a client recently. Somebody sitting at a 1 was taking about 40% of the time from the senior leadership. And they've made a choice to say, we're not going to give you that energy anymore. We're going to pull that back to about 5% of what we did. Within 3 weeks, they made an active choice to show up differently as an employee. They weren't being looked after. They weren't being, they weren't being handheld the whole time, and they made an active choice. I had another situation about 2 years ago where they actively said, listen, you guys don't care about me anymore. I'm out of here, and they left. Both scenarios were positive. Okay, both scenarios were positive. So what we want to be doing here, and this is a reason that I share this model of respect on moving people from motivated to engaged in line with the living above and below the line. This is really focused in on moving those individuals that are close to the line and pushing them up. So again, you're sort of sitting at the 3 at the top and you're pushing the right-hand side of that chart. When we look at this from, obviously this will be an acronym, we'll start with recognition, okay? A pat on the back, a sincere thank you. A few problems, just this absolute, just genuine recognition for their effort. I know many of you you do spend the time, you do head out and give that person that, Tim Hortons gift card, or you do make sure that you stop in and recognize when someone's gone above and beyond. Everything on this screen, everything in the book summary that I will send with the respect model, carrots and sticks, doesn't cost anything. We have a tendency to go, well, let's build a rewards program or let's build a points program when people just want to be respected and recognized. When we look at this empower, providing tools, training, time, information, resources to be successful. There's 3 things to look at in training. Need to know, nice to know, where to go. When you think about your training aspect of, you do not need to cover everything in your training sessions. What are the need to knows? What are the nice to knows? Where to go to get the rest? It's a quote by Bob Pike. It's need to know, nice to know, where to go. And that allows you to really go in on your training session and go, oh, wait a second, we just on the need to know side of things. I got enough time for that now. Now I can talk cultural context. Remove barriers to success. Your job is to move the blocks out of the way. I know you can attitude. Give autonomy and decision-making authority away as much as possible. Move from constructive criticism or positive feedback and constructive criticism, move to one language called supportive feedback. It's all around developing the individuals. Annual performance review. Here's one that one story I love. Club in the GTA. And I keep saying these stories of general managers that are retired. I'm glad I still see some faces that haven't retired yet. But since retired, doing a training session with their staff and superintendent, I said, well, what's one of the best practices you do? He says, well, I do exit interviews with all my seasonal staff. Food and beverage person that they've been working together for 19 years turns around and goes, really? Well, his concept was, hey, those are eyes and ears all over the property that if I don't give them the time to actually share something, what recognition, if I go back a couple of slides, does that say? Your opinion matters. It counts. We want to hear from you, okay? So again, I just want you grabbing little things. I can see some of you writing stuff down, which is great. Partnering. Let's see how many interconnections, this collaboration. You'll see the language now starting to show up above and below the line and moving you from motivated to engaged. Seek win-win solutions, okay? If you haven't had the chance, many of you have probably seen Simon Sinek's Start With Why. I encourage you to look at his most latest work around game theory and this element of we want to stay in the game. There's a great video from the Nordic Business Forum. It's about an hour long. Highly recommend watching the video. It really talks about what game are you in, and most of us don't know what game we're in and why we're in the game. So this element of win-win solutions comes into play here. I shared this earlier. This is one of the biggest opportunities within organizations right now, is clarifying what is expected. Share key results. And please don't give them the job description that was written in 1974. That is not engaging to anybody. It's required for Human Resources Canada and the CRA. That is not what you want to be sharing with these people. You do not fire somebody because they don't meet those requirements. You fire them because their attitude and behaviors, and they're not fulfilling expectations. So my recommendation around expectations is you focus in on expectations and accountabilities. You leave the job description for the accountants. Okay, if there's any accountants on the line, I apologize. But that's basically is about motivating, is watching paint dry. When I start talking about goals, successes, key metrics that are there, now we've got a different story. Where I challenge you though, and I know a lot of your properties and facilities, is you do this well at the senior level. We forget that getting down to that bag shop kid or the kid, cleaning clubs and washing carts, they deserve the same amount of clarity around their expectations. The other interesting piece, that generation, Gen Z, and the bulk of your seasonal hires actually react better to this than the Gen Xers on the call right now, okay? Because they've lived in a world where they're completely measured, completely managed, and they've always had targets. So it is not a foreign thing to them. In fact, they connect with it at a much, much deeper level. Considerations, please and thank yous, okay? It goes a long way, folks. Follow up. We talked about that earlier. Avoid people leaving people in limbo. Sensitive to a variety of things where people are coming from. I talked about Marshall Goldsmith's article on being human. Okay. This is not complicated, but for some reason we've forgotten it. And we use the crutch or the excuse to say that, well, we don't have time, or it's, pandemic times, or we don't have enough staff to get to that. Guys, those are all excuses. I want you thinking, how can we increase the consideration of the people that we work with? And trust, walk the talk, avoid micromanaging, own your mistakes. This is one we hear in employee surveys. My manager was fair. You don't have to like what your manager says. You don't even have to like your manager. But if your managers are fair in the way in which they treat all employees, your overall engagement, you will move people from motivated to engaged in a different way. And that's a very big definition, very big difference in a lot of cases. So I want you to go through here. I'm going to go through these just quickly. I'm watching my clock, Simon. I'm going to open it up for questions in just 2 minutes. Is that okay? Okay, good. I saw the thumbs. We're good. So I want you grabbing from here. What is one opportunity with one of your direct staff, one of your direct reports on your senior team? Which one do you think is, you know what? I really think we got to be saying thank you more, or we need to be talking more about supportive feedback. We need to figure out a way in which we're going to empower our staff more successfully. And again, keeping in mind, this is not about adding more training. Focus in on the need to know, nice to know, where to go. And when you're designing training, another one of Bob Pipe's tips or tricks is 90-20-8. Never more than 90 minutes without a break, no more than 20 minutes on one subject, and no more than 8 minutes without engaging the audience. So you'll notice over the course of the last 50 minutes, I've asked you to be involved on a much more higher frequency. I've asked you to do reflective questions. Yes, I've been doing most of the talking, but I'm getting you to engage differently than just listen to me the whole time. Feel free to jump in the chat. Anybody know why the 8 exists from an engagement side of things? In the interest of time, I'll share it with you. We need to be engaged as individuals every 8 minutes because we get a commercial on TV every 8 minutes. And we are now programmed and wired to something changes at the 8-minute mark. But what do we do in traditional training, or what do we do in classroom training? Sit there and talk at them for 7 hours, okay? Which is a big fundamental shift in what we've done over the last year. We don't do anything that lasts more than 90 minutes now. We spread out our work over anywhere from 60 to 90 days to engage them differently. So feel free to jump on. That's I will, here is my correspondence. I will make sure you have that. As one of the facilitators that I met years and years ago, he said, I always give 100-year guarantee. For 100 years, you can call me and ask me a question about anything. And then the sarcastic person in the room, which wasn't me, for those that know me, says, how many people actually called? And he said, over the last decade, I've had 12 people call, and I was excited to hear from them. So feel free to ask me questions. I'm open. You can jump on the mic. I hope you were able to take away some good ideas. This is a bit of an introduction to it. There's a bit of a deeper dive to consider. But I think, and I hope you saw some concepts and some ideas that you can think about the way you do your training differently, the way you engage your staff differently. Feel free to jump in. Feel free to jump on the chat if you have a question, or just unmute yourself and ask. And in the chat, if you want to really think about it here, what's one takeaway that you guys are going to share? What one takeaway you're like, I really like that knowledge idea. I really like that nugget. Feel free to jump in. Thanks for the shout out on Instagram, Tal. Are you talking my food posts or my business posts? Above line, below the line. Food, yeah. Feel free to jump in.
Hi, Mark. Can I just jump on there for a sec?
Sure, Peter.
Yeah, Peter from the Granite Club. So I just have a quick question for you in terms of, staff that, kind of your higher performing staff. For example,
Yes.
If someone comes in at a line level, maybe they have a bachelor's in hospitality, and they're gunning for that CEO position in 2 years, right?
Oh, that
Obviously,
long?
we're, we're in a position where, not like, hotels and restaurants where our leadership turnover is quite high here, leaders kind of stay around and, the average tenure would be, 5-10 years. So there isn't really that churn, which means that the newer talent coming in can kind of get those supervisory positions quickly.
Right.
So I guess what I'm asking, is there a way of keeping those individuals kind of motivated past that maybe kind of 2-year expiration mark where they're going to be looking for other opportunities?
I think I got everything. You were fading in a little bit out. So high performers, how do you retain them past the honeymoon period of that 18 to 24 months? There's two philosophies that I've worked clients through. One, you become the best. Your philosophy is we're going to be the best training ground around. So you're okay with the mindset that you're going to lose them, but you invest as much as you can into them so you get the best out of them while they're here. So I want you thinking like, is that an active choice you're going to make? No, your senior leadership team doesn't go anywhere. I mean, please say I had Joanne and Liz for me when you have a chance. They don't go, and you want to be thinking about, okay, what if that's a philosophy? Fine, okay. The other one is all through special projects. So you take cross-functional teams that you as a senior leader would more than likely typically sit on those cross-functional teams. And as opposed to you sitting on them, make them responsible for being your eyes and ears on those special projects, and then have them report back to you. We've got some really cool ways in which we do reporting when people are on special projects. So there's reporting to boards and reporting on special projects. There's 3 things when you're assigning that responsibility to somebody else. FYI, stuff that I need to discuss with you, stuff that I need a decision on. There's no more than those 3 things when you're working on a special project. You don't need to know all the details and everything going on, but if you can engage them in special projects at a cross-functional level, when you would traditionally sit on that project, that's an opportunity from a retention side of things. But there's a lot of clubs that take the philosophy. We did a hiring for a pro in the city, and part of the hiring criteria is we want to be the best factory for new head professionals. So the concept was we want them moving through here. We're going to get the best out of them when we're here. We're going to invest in them, but we want the reputation of being the best builder of new head professionals in the country. Hopefully that answers your question. More than happy to follow up with you after, Peter. Anybody else have another question? And feel free to keep jumping in with what your best takeaways were. Don't be shy. I don't mind calling on people. Best takeaways, throw them into the chat for me or jump on, unmute yourself and ask questions. We getting some takeaways? Okay. Live above the line, definitely. Highly encourage you to take some of these shots. Yes, Tal.
You obviously read a lot of business books, leadership books. Can you recommend 2 or 3 books for the panel and the group that you would recommend we read?
Well, Fix It would definitely be one. I'm going to make sure this gets available. The bulk of what we're actually doing right now is focusing in on psychological safety. And there's, if you look up the Google 8, there's a good set of resources that Google has put out. So Google in 2015 went out to prove that managers didn't matter. And they did it in conjunction with Harvard Business Review, and they proved themselves wrong, that actually managers are critical to the success of the organization, and that we need to make sure they have these specific 8 criteria. So because they're Google, they were able to do a study that was just ginormous in size. But what they've done is they've taken all of that content, and the URL is escaping me right now, but I'll make sure. But if you do the Google 8 and Harvard Business Review, you will find a whole pile of free resources that you can use for working with your teams. The big one we're doing on right now is this, which is part of the Google research, is psychological safety. So the 4 stages of psychological safety is current read that I have right now. And let me just see, there's a few back here that I would always do. Fusion Leadership has been around for a while. Some of you have seen I have a talk on that one, but I always like going back to that on conventional leadership versus fusion leadership. But I would say psychological safety, getting accountability right now, and then some of the classics. But I would definitely take a look at that Google 8 research. It's pretty interesting.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Really, really good session.
Thank you. Any more questions, folks? I'm not going anywhere, so if you want to, feel free. I know we're just over the top of the hour, Mr. Bevan, so I'm happy to hang out and ask questions. Feel free to keep adding best takeaway, Lisa, supportive feedback, not negative or positive. That's great. Yes, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Mr. Grass, for coming. Good to see you. The empowerment aspect of things. So, Martin, I think the big piece that I would be pushing on the empowerment is challenging your senior staff to go, what can we actually empower people to do, not what we've always done. And that's the big thing. You make a big list of everything that needs to get done, and then you go, oh, well, why are we doing that? I remember talking to a golf professional that said, head pro, I said, what's your biggest responsibility when you got a shotgun? You got 144 people leaving. He said, what is your biggest focus? He said, making sure all of the, I forget the technical term, you guys can help me, but the sand, the divot repair was full. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, you have like people running all over the place, and that's what your focus was. So it was a real big disconnect to actually what the energy was, where his energy was focused. So again, I want you thinking every single task. We just did this task analysis with a family-owned corporation going into its third generation. And the first time in the history of the company, they actually wrote down all the tasks of what they did in a spreadsheet, who does what. And yes, it was a taxing exercise, but it got done. And then once they did it, they actually realized, oh, well, wait a second, there's the bump from last year, or there's the opportunity that we've been missing. But they took the time to slow down and actually look at their tasks and really heavily focus on them. Yes, it can, that task analysis can be cumbersome at times. But once you actually document it, you'll actually start to see going, oh, wait a second, the benefit is here. I remember working with a catering manager that said to me, my responsibility is making sure every one of those place settings is right before the wedding starts. And I'm thinking to myself, first of all, I don't even know how to set this properly. And you've got 12 staff setting up here. Why don't we give them each a picture as to what the perfect setting is and have them pair up and partner with each other? And then that's the self-check. Why does it always have to be with the top person to ensure that you're delivering effectively, or you're delivering the standards or the results? We just did this, talked about it with a club on the West Coast, and we've been doing our Leadership Essentials program with them, and it was a real big aha for the superintendents. There's a team of 4 that are on the leadership program, and I said, think about, I remember having this aha moment when I go to pick up my kid who's now 15. He was in daycare at the time, and I'm, I haven't slept, the normal young kid thing, and I'm looking going, how the heck do they get these kids to put all of these toys back? And I'm looking at my house going, a robber would just come in and go, yeah, no, I'm out. I can't even find the stuff we're stealing. They had photos on each one of those little boxes, and the kids would go, that goes the Legos, the train goes here. So it was this big aha when I said, well, everybody's got a phone that's bigger, that will take better pictures than you can actually email. Let's start photographing where everything goes. What are the standards? Why do we have to put everything in black and white? Black on white writing is actually the worst way to retain information, both as a child and also as an adult. So the best way to actually increase your overall attention, and I know this from working through my dyslexia when I was in university, was I actually used color overlays. So for those that are been around long enough, remember acetates and the overhead projector? Okay. I used for when I got diagnosed, it was yellow and green were the best for me from a retention side of things. Some people go with a blue and a pink, but that actually increases your ability to retain for everybody, not just those that have learning challenges. So again, take that concept and think about the black and white paper you're sharing with people. What are you doing to look at this differently? What do we got? Some more questions here. Okay, yep, I'll send the slides. Slides are going to be made available for sure. Thanks, Dan. I think Dan had to leave. Simon, do you have any questions? You were gracious enough to invite me here. Any questions on your end?
Mark, that was a great session as always, and it's so timely, like especially for our seasonal businesses where onboarding, and I always say our success always lies with our seasonal staff, and they have the contact with our members, and all those things are definitely appreciated. So one question I have, and not to put someone on the spot here, but there happens to be a recently retired club manager on the call who was at Royal Montreal for a few years, Mr. Denzel Palmer. And I know you kind of grew up in Montreal, but what three things would you say that you saw from Denzel that would be great takeaways for all of us as leaders, both in if it's engagement, training, measuring goals? What things would you say that Denzel did so well?
Well, I shared the story earlier. I didn't see you. I'm looking at too many different screens here. For those that are interested, I will share the reverse of this studio with you on what I'm looking at, because we are set up to deliver, and we deliver across the country on a regular basis now. The story that I shared earlier, Denzel, was you and I walking from the clubhouse to the pro shop, and then we took a golf cart up to the pool because that was too far to walk. But the picking up the piece of garbage, and I've used this story I've been doing this now. McKinley was 18 years in business as of last year. I've used that story because I was a student at the time. The picking up the piece of garbage, helping somebody with their golf clubs, and making sure that they got their cart. Those three actions happened by me I was a lifeguard. I mean, half the time I got paid just to sit there because nobody actually used the property other than Denzel's kids, which was how I got to know them. But that actions of watching somebody do that to me was critical. The other one was, for those that ever had the chance to see Denzel's office, he had a bat phone. So there was a red phone in his office, and whether it's true, whether the story's true or not, it was only certain people had that phone, and it was Viv. I don't even think the kids had it, but it was Viv and the president. So you answered that phone when it rang. And this aspect of, I think Paul, you said, Morel, you said it earlier, this follow through aspect of things. The other piece that I will share is the empowerment side of things. Denzel does, he might know more than I'm probably teasing him right now about running pools. I knew enough to be dangerous running pools. I didn't know squat about repairing pools. But I was willing to try. I was willing to take the risk. And we pulled, the way the story goes, we pulled Tim off the grounds crew, Denzel's oldest son, and he and I spent the better part of 18 to 20 hours a day for 3 days, breaking down each one of the filters by hand. So for those that have a home pool filter, those big sort of egg style brown ones with the 57 million bolts around the outside. So the pool, as far as I know, it's still set up this way, Denzel. So they're run on basically residential level filters, and they cascade to each other. So once we realized what was going on, the pool basically looked like skim milk, and we had to close it until we could fix this, no matter what chemical we threw at the thing. But again, I was empowered, and Denzel was willing to take the risk. He could have easily hired outside people to come in and do it and schedule it accordingly. We were able to break that stuff down and have the pool operational in under 2 or 3 days. Right. And so that aspect of trusting someone that didn't know squat, or at least convinced him that I knew enough. So, and by the way, that happened twice, because Denzel, as I shared, has been a longtime mentor and a longtime friend. I was over for dinner once I had moved on and graduated, and it happened a second time. So we ended up doing it twice over the course of my tenure and past tenure at Royal. So those would be the three things that I would share. Good question, Simon. Hope you don't mind me sharing, Denzel.
Not a bit. No, it was always a great effort on my part to try and create an environment in which the team was motivated to do great work and to enjoy it at the same time. And I think personally, I survived and enjoyed 42 years as a general manager because I responded to feedback. I like that section of your presentation. And another general manager that I was well acquainted with only responded to feedback by saying, "I'll look into it." And his staff normally referred to him as the mirror because he was always going to look into it. So I think responding to feedback in a timely manner is one way to gain great respect from your team. Anyway, it's great to be a part of today's presentation. Another great piece of work from you, Mark.
Thank you.
One thing I find strange is that originally, whenever we started to work together and became friends, I had red hair and you had dark hair. I don't know if it's the lighting now, but things have
Yeah,
changed.
there's studio lights here. So when we first started setting up the studio, I had some more powerful lights, but if I turned the right way, all the hair went away. So I had to take the lights down a notch.
Anyway,
So,
well, all the best to everyone on the call, and of course to your dear wife, Kim.
Thank you, Denzel. You reminded me of one more quote from a retired general manager that I worked with for quite some time. And it's a bit of a play on the Nordstrom's quote. I remember supporting them during an orientation, and general manager gets to stand up and says, "Okay, this is, I'm going to do my presentation." I'm like, "Oh, phew." I've been leading and doing exercises and leadership and team building stuff with them. And I go, "Oh, great. I get a break." He gets up, he does one slide. It's red with black writing. I still remember it. And I'm thinking, well, wait a second. I budgeted you being up there for like 20, 30 minutes. And he said, "This is my philosophy." And it says, "Do the right things for the right reasons in the interest of the members and guests. And I've got your back, period." And then he sat down. That was it. So the first time I was really caught off guard because I didn't see it ahead of time. Second time I was like, okay, I know this is only one bloody slide, so I'm not even going to sit down at this point. But again, this different philosophy, it was the tightest, best philosophy I'd seen around leading within the private club space. Well-respected manager general manager that's worked in multiple places across the country. Any other questions? So my commitment, folks, is a couple of things. One, I'll make sure I share the book list, Tal, to your point, so everybody's got those. I'll get the Google link for you. I'll make sure the book summary from Fix It, which we spoke about here, as well as the book on respect, carrots, and sticks is shared. We will make sure the PowerPoint is available. Simon is doing the recording. That'll be made available as well. I encourage you to go back to it. And finally, once I get the list of all the participants, please make sure Simon has your email for those that jumped in late, so that we can send to you directly the individual learning loop, the team learning loop, and your organizational learning loop. So there'll be 3 follow-ups that I've committed to making sure you have during this as a part of this session. So Simon, I'll hand it back to you unless anybody else wants any last minute questions.
Thank you, Mark. As always, very informative, very timely. And for those of you who have not used Mark before, like, this is just a snippet of what he does. And I know I've used him and his company several times at clubs, and he is an expert at catering a program or delivering a program that fits your club and fits your needs. So Mark, on behalf of the CSCM and the Southwest Ontario Branch Board, definitely want to thank you for your time. You are a busy man, and definitely appreciate the education that is so well received by our team. So thanks again, everyone, for participating today. Thank you for the time. We really appreciate seeing people from different branches. Our next session is on Wednesday, April the 7th, with Nicole Edwards-Heyman from People side, and she'll be speaking to the 7 characteristics of effective feedback. So on behalf of our board, on behalf of Joanne Hosak, our president, thank you all, and be well, stay healthy, and good luck this coming season. Take care.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.